Lesson 4, topic angle pair relationships, learning target. I can label angles and their relationships in pairs. First kind of pairs are complementary angles and supplementary angles. So complementary angles are two angles that sum or add to 90 degrees. Supplementary angles are two angles that sum, so add to 180 degrees. So one way to keep this straight is C comes before S in the alphabet and 90 comes before 180 if you were counting numerically starting at 0. So that could help you keep it straight. So we want to find the missing angle measure. So let's just start on our complementary side. So we know that these angles are complementary because that's what we're told when we're set up. So if these guys are complementary, that means we know that this angle, so I'll just call it angle X plus 30. So X plus 30 equals 90. We could solve the equation, so subtract 30 on both sides, and we get X equals 60. Now this is an example of adjacent angles because these angles are touching. So those complementary angles would be 60 and 30. Non-adjacent, so we have angle 35 and angle unknown, so I'm going to call that X again. These are non-adjacent because they're not touching, but we can still have complementary non-adjacent angles. So again, X plus 35 equals 90. That's the setup because they're complementary, so they are going to sum to 90. Solve that for X, we get X equals 55 degrees. Should be very precise in our communication there. Now if we go over to our supplementary angles, again, these are going to sum to 180. So we have our adjacent example. They share this side, so we have angle X plus 130 equals 180 because they sum to 180 when they're supplementary. So we can solve for X, subtract 130, and we get 50 degrees. Non-adjacent angle, we have two angles that don't share a side, they aren't touching. So we have angle X plus 70 equals 180. Solve that for X by subtracting 70 on both sides, and we get X equals 110 degrees. Next set of pairs, we have linear pair and vertical angles. So we'll start by talking about linear pairs. Linear pairs are two adjacent, so touching, angles that create a line. You see linear, there's that word line in it. So it's two adjacent angles that create a line. So we have, here's the line. They share the side, so angle A and angle B are adjacent, and they sum to 180, which means linear pairs are supplementary and must be adjacent. So if they are an adjacent pair that's supplementary, then they're a linear pair. And if we go on the other side, vertical angles, if you did lesson 4.0, you have a head start, but vertical angles are non-adjacent, so not touching. If you remember that for vertical angles, that'll be very helpful. Formed by two straight lines intersecting. So here we have two lines intersecting. Vertical angles would be the angles that are across from each other, so the pink pair and the blue pair. And one thing you should have discovered in lesson 4.0 is that vertical angles are congruent. They have the same measure, so the pink pair and the blue pair equal the same amount. So let's put this to practice. We've got find the values of X and Y and then find the angle measures value. So if we just start by looking at our picture, we notice we have two lines intersecting, which means we have vertical angles. So we know that pair 1 and 3 are vertical angles. So that means the measure of angle 1 is going to be equal to the measure of angle 3. So this value right here and this value right here are going to be the same. And then we also have this pair right here, 2 and 4. So we know that the measure of angle 2 is going to be equal to the measure of angle 4. So these guys will be the same. Now we have to solve for the variables. So if we look at our variables, we have a y here, an x here, and an x here, which means that we can't use this vertical angle congruent same measure to solve for x because there's a y on this side and an x on this side. So what we're going to want to do is look at this pair right here because these guys both have an x, the 3x and an 8x. So if we look at angle 3 and angle 4, we notice that they're on the same line and they're just sharing that side. So this would be a linear pair. So they are going to be supplementary. These two angles right here are going to sum to 180, which means we can set up an equation to help us solve for the value of x because we know that this and this add to 180. So we set up the equation 3x plus 8x plus 26 equals 180. So here we have that equation. And now all we have to do is solve it for x, get x by itself. We can start by combining our like terms. We have 3x plus 8x, which is 11x plus 26 equals 180. Then we need to undo this plus 26 with minus 26 equals, minus 26. So we have 11x equals 180 minus 26 is 154. Last step, we need to divide by 11 to get x by itself. When we do that, we get x equals 154 divided by 11 is 14. So now we know the value of x, which means we can figure out the value of angle 4 and of angle 3 by just plugging in that value for x. So we know 3 times 14, that'd be 3 times x, when x is 14. So 3 times 14 is 42. So we know that the measure of angle 4 is 42 degrees. And then we know that angle 3 equals 8x plus 26. So if we plug 14 in for x, so 8 times 14 plus 26, well, 8 times 14 is 112, plus 26 is 138. So we know that the measure of angle 3 is 138 degrees. These are a linear pair, which means their sum should be 180. To check, to make sure we did our math right, add these up, 0, 8, 1. Check, we're good. So I'm going to go back to our original slide. We know that the measure of angle 3 is 138 degrees, and the measure of angle 4 was 42 degrees. Okay, just making sure I copied it over right. And now remember, we had that vertical angle pair, which means the measure of angle 1 is also going to be 138 degrees. And the measure of angle 2 is going to be 42 degrees. Last step, I would like you to find the value of y and check it using Edpuzzle.